Hey, what's going on, guys? So I've got this really cool tutorial right here that I'm gonna go through. Feel free to check it out. I'll throw the link in the description below. But what we're gonna do here is build a Vue app with Firebase Authentication, and I'm just gonna kind of go through this tutorial as a guideline. So feel free to, like I said, check it out, and otherwise just keep watching this video, and hopefully we build something cool here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is open up my terminal here. And we're going to make sure that I'm in the right directory. So cd into my code directory. And before I create a new project, I'm going to make sure that I have the Vue CLI installed. And to do that, we can just do npm install -g at vue-cli. Okay, and once that's installed, you can go ahead and create your new project. I'm going to call this project Firebase Auth. And we are going to go ahead and manually select our features. And I'm going to go down to router, and if you hit spacebar, it'll add it. And then just go ahead and hit return. And we're going to select no here. And I'm just going to hit return again and then do lint on save. And I'm going to place config in the dedicated config files. And I won't save this as a preset for the future. Okay, now that our project's initialized, we can enter into the Firebase auth. So I'm just going to go cd Firebase auth to get into our project, and then we can run npm run serve. And what that's going to do is it's going to show us that at localhost 8081 we can find our project. So if we go over here to localhost 8081, we have a template of our Vue app nicely created for us. Cool. So now I'm just going to go back to the terminal so that we can open up our project in VS Code. So I'll go here and I'm going to shut this down and then do code. And that's going to open up our project here in VS Code. And now that Vue has created all of these files nicely structured for us, I can go into views, and we're just going to create a new view. And let's call this the login view. And the main components of a Vue file are the template, the script, and the style. So let's go ahead and create those. Oops. And in the template, we're going to create a main div called login. Oops, here we go. And in that div, we're going to have an h3 that says sign in. And below that, we're going to have an input of type text. And we'll have a placeholder that says email. And then we're just going to go ahead and break that line. Oops. And below the email input, we'll have a password input. So password input type, and this will be password. And of course, the placeholder will be password. And below the password input, we'll have a button that says login. And then below that, we'll add a p tag. Just in case the user doesn't have an account, we can redirect them to the sign up page. So say don't have an account and then sign up. Okay, so now that we have our login component completed, now all we need to do is just add it to our router. And if you remember when we initialized our app, we selected the router option. So we have that right here. And in the routes array, we'll add a new object that takes 3 properties. So let's just go ahead and add an object. And the first property will be path, which will just be login. And the second property will be name, which we'll call login. And the third property is the component property. And this just references the login component, and that we need to import. And we can just import login from views login.view. So now if everything's set up correctly, we can go ahead and run npm run serve, and we can find that route. So if we go over here to localhost 8081, and I'll just go over here, type it in. Okay, so this is our home route, and then if we go to login, boom, there it is. You can see our login components showing correctly. Now, to avoid confusion right here with the routing, the home and about, let's just replace. We're going to replace this with the view logo. So come over here, and if we go to the home view, oops, not the home view, I mean the app view, we can see right here there's this div that has the nav. Let's just go ahead and delete that. And now we can grab the view logo from the home here. Let's see, right here, image, and go back to the app and throw it in there. Okay, once that's saved, we can go back to our app here, and it's complaining. Oh, it's because we have the wrong path here. So let's go back and just got to get rid of a directory. And there you see it. And also, since we're not going to be using this about component, let's just go ahead and remove this totally. And then we can go into here in the router and find the about. And let's just get rid of that. Now, if we go back to our app right here, you can kind of see it doesn't look the best. It doesn't have the best styling. So that's the next step we're going to do, is fix the styling. So first we need to go into the login component, and then we'll be adding the styling down here in the style tag. And if you add the attribute here called scoped, what it's going to do here in view is it's going to limit the CSS that we add to only this component. So since we named the class here logged in, it's going to, if we select this div, it's going to take this entire div. So I'm just going to go here and say login, and we'll give it a margin top of 40 pixels. And then after that, we can just go ahead and select the input. And I'm going to give this input a margin, and the top will be 10 pixels, and then the right will be 0. And then we'll give it a width of 20%. And we'll give it a padding of 15 pixels. And if we go back, we should see the input boxes are looking a little bit better. Yep. Now the next thing we're going to select a style is the button. And we're going to give the button a margin top of 10 pixels. And then we'll give it a width of 10%. And then we're going to make the cursor, when we hover over it, a pointer. So let's go back to our app and check how things are looking. Okay, yep, it's pointing on hover. And instead of 10 pixels, let's just give it a little bit more here on the top. All right, so now we can select our p tag. And then we're going to give this p tag a margin top of 40 pixels. And we'll give it a font size of 13 pixels. And then the p tag is going to have an anchor tag here. So let's select the anchor tag and the p tag. And we're going to give this a text decoration of underline. And then also make this cursor a pointer. Now, hopefully this should make our page look a lot better. And this still doesn't look all that great. And I think what's going on here is we need to add this break. Okay, there we go. All right, so everything's lined up, looking great. And now that we've got the login component finished, now we can go ahead and add the sign up view here. And just so you know, every file that we add in here is actually a component. Some people get confused about whether or not the files we add in here are considered views or components. It is technically a component as well, but the convention right here of the view CLI and how it starts up our project, it throws these components into the views as well. So don't let that throw you off. It's just another way of naming things. So we'll just go ahead and click new file, and we'll call this sign up. And so now we'll just do the same thing. We'll add a template, a script, and a style tag. So template. Okay, so now in this template, we'll just have one big div again, and this will be called sign up. So class equals sign up. And first we'll just add a p tag here that says, let's create your account. And below this, we'll have our first input. So input will be type text, and the placeholder will be email. And then the next component will be password. So, or not component, sorry, the next input. And type password. And then of course the placeholder will be password. Oops, and don't forget to add your breaks here. And now we need to add our button. And this will be sign up. And then we need a way for them to go back to the login if they need to. So we can just do a span here and just say, or go back to login. Cool. So now the thing is so here in the sign up, if we go back to the login, we didn't really add anything in the script tag. But right here with the sign up, we're actually going to add some logic in here. So what Vue does in this script tag here is what you'll do is you'll export default an object, and in that object, Vue has several properties you can use, like the data property, the methods property. So like the data property, you can store all your data, or just your state for that component. And then in the methods property, you can have several different methods that interact with this component, and you'll be putting a lot of logic in here and storing a lot of state in this script tag. So let's go ahead and export default our object. So export default, and then our object. And the first property that normally we give this is the name, and this is going to be the sign up component. So just sign up. Oops, I forgot to put that in a string here. And then the second property will be the data property. So just data. Oh, excuse me, it's a method, so there we go. And then this data method is going to return an empty object for now. So there we go. And then the last property we'll add here is going to be the method. So, and then we're going to make this an object. Cool. So now before we move on, we're going to add just some styling. Again, make it nice and pretty. So style scoped. Oh, not scope, scoped. And again, we need to select this main div right here. So to do that, it's class sign up. So let's just go in here and say sign up. And this is going to be a margin top of 40 pixels. And now we can select this input. So, and this will have a margin top of 10 pixels, and then the right will be 0. And just kind of a side note, the way CSS works, it's kind of like a clockwise direction starting at 12 o'clock. So this value right here will be 10. The 10 pixels will be the top value, the top margin, and then this 0 will be the right. And then if I were to add like a 5, that would be the bottom. And then, you know, the fourth one would be the left. So just think of it going around the clock. Cool. So now we can add the width here. And we're going to make that width 20%. And then we'll give it a padding of 15 pixels. All right. So now that we have the input all styled, we can just go down here and start styling up the button. And we're going to add a margin top of 10 pixels. and we're going to give it a width of 10%, and we'll make the cursor a pointer. Okay, so now we can style the span tag. So let's go down here and do span. And we'll make it a display of block here. So display block. And we'll give it a margin top of 20 pixels. And a font size of 11. Oops, let's see. Need to add the pixels there. Okay, so now that this sign up component's all styled up, we can go over to our views, or not our views, sorry, our route file here, and we're going to add it into here. So let's go ahead and add the sign up. Okay, so again, here in the routes array, we're going to add another object in here, and this is going to have a path. Oops, let's see, object, and then path of sign up. Wait, hold on, not like that. Sorry, let's go here, sign up. There we go. And then the name is also going to be sign up. And then the component right here is sign up. So let's add that component. Cool. So now, if everything's done right, we should be able to go to our browser and check out the sign up component. So let's go on over to here. And as you can see, we're still in the login. So let's go sign up. Cool, here it is. Let's create your account, email, password, and the sign up button. Awesome. All right, so now the next step, if you remember, so we added this little p tag right here. It says, or go back to login. So what we want to do is we want to be able to go back to login from the sign up component and then vice versa. So let's go back over to the code. And if we go back to the login, actually, let's start here at the sign up view. You can see right here we have the span tag or go back to login. So right here, or sorry, not right here, right before the login. So view router gives us the router link component that we can use. So let's just go ahead and add that right here. Oh, we accidentally deleted. So we're at the sign up. We need to go back to login. And so what happens here is we wrapped this text right here with the router link. So if we say, if we just add this attribute to /login, what happens is now when they click right here on the login word, it's going to send them back to the login route. So now we just need to go ahead and go back to the login here and do the same thing for sign up. So right here, we'll say router link. And this is going to go back to sign up. Now, if we save this and go here, we have an error. Okay, so just a syntax error over here. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Sweet. So now if I click here to login, it sends me to login, and then, whoops, looks like we have another syntax error. Oh, whoops. Up here, and then we forgot to add the to attribute. So to /sign up. So now if we go back here, yep, there it is, sign up. So it sends us to the sign up. Cool. So log in, sign up. Awesome. All right. So the next routing functionality we want to add is when the user, let's say the user enters the email and password and then they hit login, we want them to go to the home. Let's see. So let's just go home. We want them to go to the home route, but only if they're authenticated. And once we bring in Firebase, we'll be able to do that. But for now, let's make it so that when we click this login button, it's going to redirect the user to the home path. So to do that, we're just going to go right over here to the login component. And here's our button. And we're going to add a click event. So at click equals, and then what this is going to do is it's going to call the login method once the user clicks. And this might be confusing right now because we don't have this login method created. We're going to create it right down here in the script tag. So first we need to export default, an object. And we're going to give it a name property of login. And we're going to give it a data method, which is then going to return an object right here. And then under the data method, we're going to go ahead and add a methods property. And this methods property is going to contain this login function right here, or method. So this is where we're going to put the logic for once the user clicks on the button. So we'll just add this login method here. And what's cool is that view router gives us this replace method. And so the way this works is you can just say this dot router dot replace, and then in here we can just say home. Now you might be wondering why we're using this. If we go over here to the main JS file, you can see that router is injected into the Vue app. And what this does is it makes it so that we can easily access the router from any component within the app. So yeah, if we go back here to, where were we? Yep, login right here. So we have this .router .replace home. So hopefully when the user clicks on the button, it's going to replace the route with home, and then it'll redirect the user to the home page. Now, in order for this to work though, we just need to make one more change. So let's go into the router file, and the path right now is just /, but we need to switch this to home. And now that that's fixed, let's go back to our app, and hopefully when we click this button, yep, it redirects us to home. Now you can see we have two of these logos. Let's go ahead and fix that right now. And to do that, we can just go into our home component, and let's just go ahead and delete the logo from here. And if we go back, yep, just one logo now, so that looks a lot better. Okay, so awesome. Now that our front end is all set up, we can get to the fun stuff here and integrate with Firebase. So if you don't have a Firebase account yet, you'll need to create one, but let's just go here to firebase.com. And I do have an account, so I'm going to go to my console. And then from here, we can just create a new project. So add project. And then I'm just going to call this view auth. And I'm going to leave everything default right here and then hit accept. Okay, and once that's all loaded, you can just hit continue right here. And that's going to throw you into your project. And then from here, you'll just go over to getting set up with the web. And you can give your app a nickname. So I'm just going to keep it Firebase auth. I'm not going to set up Firebase hosting for now. And then if you hit register app, it's going to give us the code that we need to add. And it gives you a bunch of code here. And really for what we're doing right now, all we're going to do is just grab this code in between the script. You don't need to include the script because we're going to add this into the Vue file here. And so I will copy that, and then back here in our main, this is where we're going to paste the code. And right above here where we instantiate this view, we're going to paste that code in. And I'm going to change that var to a const here. Now, as you can see here, it's complaining that we're using Firebase, but it's not declared. So we're going to import that. And we actually don't have Firebase in our project yet, so that's the next step, is we need to install that. So we need to exit out of that and clear this, and now we're ready to install. And I'm going to do npm install -- save Firebase, and that's going to save Firebase as a dependency. All right, so it looks like everything installed okay. And just a side note, I want to make sure I mention that we're pasting this Firebase config into our main.js file for simplicity for this tutorial. If you're creating a production app, I would suggest creating a new configuration file and adding your Firebase configuration in that separate file. But yeah, for simplicity's sake, we'll just keep going with this. All right, now that Firebase is all set up, we should be able to go into our signup component and start adding our configuration to store or to use the email and password to sign up a user. So let's get started with that. And the first thing I'm going to do is do an @click here, so that when the user clicks on the button, it sends them to the sign up function, or I guess method, and then we'll add that in the methods here in a second. But before we do that, so here with the two inputs, we're actually going to bind these values into the data method down here. So in this return, we can just say email, and then we'll say password. And then up here in the input, in the email one, we can say vbind. Or excuse me, not vbind, we're doing vmodel. So let's do vmodel, and then equals email. And then down here, we'll do vmodel equals password. And so what that's going to do is it's going to bind the input in both of these input elements, and it's going to bind it into this data method right here, so that whenever the user updates their email or password, it's just going to do a two-way binding and update these values right here. Cool. So now that that's all set up, we can go ahead and implement our logic for the sign up. So let's just say sign up, and that's going to be a function. Now, of course, before we use Firebase, we're going to have to import that. So let's go up here and just do import. And we'll do import Firebase from Firebase. Cool. And so now that we've imported Firebase, we can use it in here in this function. So if we go Firebase, oops, where did our options go? Firebase dot auth. Yep. So it gives us this auth right here, and we can call that. And after we call the Firebase auth method, it's going to give us, let's see, where'd it go? I think it's create user with email and password. And this function is going to take two arguments right here. It's going to take the email and the password. So we'll just say this.email and then this.password. And then it's actually, so Firebase is going to give us a promise here. And so if everything went successful with creating the user with email and password, it's going to return a success. And if it failed, then it's going to return a failure. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to say .then, because it returns a promise. And our first argument is the success one. So we're going to just alert the user that they were successfully logged in. So we can just say function and then alert, your account has been successfully, how do you spell successfully, created. Cool, and then we can save that. It reformats it, and then the next argument will be the error. So we'll just go here, and then this one's going to be function, and it's actually going to give us an error right here. So we can use that, and then we'll go here and say alert. Oops. And then error.message, since the error gives us a message. Awesome. So again, Firebase is going to return a promise. That's what this .then is. with an onResolve and onReject function. So here's our onResolve, and then here's our onReject. And depending on the status, the user is going to see one of these two alerts. Okay, so we're almost finished with this sign up step. There is one change we need to make though, and that change is actually going to be over here in Firebase. So let's go back to Firebase, and then in the Authentication tab right here, we actually need to go to sign in method, and see how it says disabled for email and password? We're going to change that to enabled. And I don't want to do passwordless sign in, so I'm just going to hit save. And now I'm just going to go back to our app here and make sure everything's saved correctly. And if we go back to our browser, let's go ahead and test this out. So, oh boy, can't resolve Firebase in FireAuth source. Okay, so let's go back here and see what's going on. And this is my bad. You probably caught this before I did. So this is not a directory that we're trying to go to. Okay, so save that, refresh. And I think our server isn't running. So we'll just do npm run serve. And once that's going, once the server's running, we can go to localhost 8081. Okay, so this is the home. And we want sign up. So right here, I'm just going to say test@test.com. And then just whatever password you guys want. And check it out. We actually have a good little alert right here. Your account has been successfully created. Awesome. So now if we go back to Firebase, just to double check that everything really did work how it says it did, we can go to Firebase, or sorry, database. Oops, not database. We want to go to storage maybe. Oh, no, sorry. We want to go to authentication. So right here in authentication, we have users, and check it out. Test@test.com. That is pretty awesome. So congratulations, guys. That is cool. You just signed in your first, or you just created your first user with Firebase authentication. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can use that email and password to sign the user in. So we'll go back here to the login component, and I'm just going to minimize the terminal right there. And we're going to sort of do the same thing here. We're just going to add a vmodel on this input. Actually on both inputs here. So vmodel equals, and then we'll do email. And then on this input, we can do vmodel equals password. Now all we need to do is add those fields in here in the data. So we'll just say email and then password. And right here, we already have the login function. So we're actually going to delete this and add our new logic in here. So remember, when the user clicks on this button, it's going to fire off this login method right here. But now this time we want to use Firebase. So to do that, remember we got to import Firebase. And we're going to use Firebase auth again. So Firebase auth. But this time we're going to do sign in with email and password. And this method is going to take two arguments, the email and password again. So this .email and this .password. And this Firebase method is also going to return a promise. So we just say .then. And the first callback function will be a success, and the second one will be a failure. So right here, we'll just say function. And then we can do another alert. And for this second callback, this is going to be the error. So function. Oh, whoops, we need to pass in the error. And we're just going to say error.message. And I think that should be it. So let's go ahead and save this, and we're going to go back to our project. So just let's go back to our project and let's go to the login page. So I'm going to just use the same email and password. Awesome, and it worked. So yeah, our status is that we are signed in right now, which means we are authenticated. So good job, guys. We're signed in, we're authenticated. We have both the sign up and the sign in working. The next step now is to make it so that the user can only, like once when the user logs in, it's going to redirect them to the home route, and they can only go to that home route if they're logged in. So let's go ahead and start that now. Oh crap, and it looks like my battery's dying, so let's plug in my computer real quick. Awesome. All right, so these next changes we're going to go back to the router file here, and we're going to add like a catch-all route here. So just need to add this object, and for the path, we can just say we can just do this little star. And what that's going to do is it's going to say, okay, so for any given random path, just go ahead to the login component. Oops, sorry, not component. We want to say redirect. And so that's going to redirect to login. And we're going to add another path here. So, and this one's just going to be /. And we'll do the same thing with that. We're just going to redirect it to login. Now, the main concern right now is we want to make sure that the user can only get to this path if they're logged in. And view router gives us a meta property that we can work with. So we'll just say meta, and then that's going to allow us to use a property called requires auth, I believe, requires auth. And we just set that to true. So now that we have this implementation in place, we can do a little bit of testing here. And if we like enter in a bad URL, it should redirect us to the login. So let's go ahead and try that out. So we'll just go over back to our app here. Okay, so let's first log in. So let's see, test at, or actually let's go home. Okay, so we can get to our home page. And then let's just add some junk there. See, it's going to redirect us to the login. So again, back to the login. All right, so our next step is to redirect the routes if our user is authenticated. So, you know, if you're authenticated, they can go to the home page. And to do that, we're going to need to add some logic here at the bottom of this router file right here. And you see here, we have this exports default new router. We're actually going to change this a little bit. Instead of doing an export default right off the bat here, we're actually going to store this new router. And so we'll just say const router equals new router. And so what that does is it stores this new router instance in this router variable so that we can like change things using this variable down below. So like, for example, view router gives us a before each method that we can use on this variable, and we're actually going to use that before each to like iterate through this array and like add functionality before each path is hit. So we'll just go down here and let's just say router dot before each, and this before each is going to take a function as an argument. So let's just go here, and the function's going to have 3 parameters in it, which will be to from and next. So the to parameter is the target route object, and then the from is the one that it's coming from, and the next parameter is the function that must be called to resolve the hook. If it's not making sense yet, just hang in there. As we're coding, it'll all make more sense. So the first thing we need to do is grab the current user from Firebase. So we can do this by just saying firebase.auth.current user. And then we will store that. So const current user. And now we want to store the records that require authentication in a variable. So to do that, let's just go down here, and I'm going to say const requires auth. And we're going to look into this to parameter where we're going. So to, and then we'll use dot matched and then dot sum. And that sum function, this is where we're going to go through and we're going to look at each record and see if that record has the required auth property. So in here, we'll just say for every record that has the required auth property, so requires auth, and that should do it right there. So cool. That's how we're going to find out if the record or the route has a property of requires auth. And if it does, we can go down here and continue with our logic. And the best way to think about this is if we don't have a current user, that means we don't want to be logged into the app. So we want them. So what page do we want the user to be at if they're at this state? Really, it only makes sense that they're in either the login page or the sign up page. So what we're going to do is we're just going to throw them over to the login page. So to do that logic, we just say if requires auth. So if that's true and it's not the current user, oops, if that's the case, then we can use the next value right here. And that parameter is a function which will take the value of the URL route that they're going to. So we'll just say send them to login. Now, the next step is if the route doesn't require auth, so that would be everything but home. So login, sign up, everything else. But we do have a current user. So this value is, we actually have a truthy value in here of a current user. Then the next function parameter here is actually, it's going to take the home path. So let's go ahead and do that. So not requires auth and current user. Then we go next and home. And then for anything else, we just do next. Cool. So now we have router, this before each going on the router, and now we can take this router value and export it. So right here, we'll just go export default router. And it looks like our app is still complaining about the Firebase, so we got to import Firebase in here. Now it feels like we're getting closer, but we're not quite done yet. If we go over to our main.js file, we're initializing our Vue app, but the problem is we may initialize the app before Firebase is ready for us. And to get around that, we can actually just wrap our Vue app in the Firebase on-off changed method that they give us, and that way we ensure that we're not initializing our Vue app before Firebase is ready. So to get around that, we'll need to use Firebase auth. So let's just go here. And use the on-auth state changed. And then this is going to take a function. So, and we're going to add this logic in this return function. But before that, we just want to initialize our app right here. So we'll say let app, and we're just going to make it an empty string. And so now in here, we can assign our Vue instance to that app. So we'll just say app equals, and just grab this. And so now we can check if the app isn't truthy. So we'll say if not app. And then that means we can go ahead and run this logic. Okay, so we assign the Vue instance to app as long as if app isn't truthy, and that should fix our problem of initializing our Vue instance before Firebase is ready. So that's how we get around that. Okay, so let's see where we're at with our app. Let's go ahead and save everything. Go back over here. I'm just gonna refresh. Okay, so it sends us to, we're still at home. Sign in. Okay. it redirects us to home. And this is actually a good sign because it's showing that the redirection is happening since we're logged in here. So now we're actually at the last stage of this app. We're going to redirect to the home page as soon as the user signs in or signs up, and then we're going to have a little logout button so that when the user clicks that logout button, it signs them out of the app and returns them back to the login or sign up page. So let's go ahead and head back over to our code here. And if we go to our home component right here, let's just add like a button so that the user can log out from here. And I'm not going to lie, this hello world component's kind of sloppy right now and just annoying. So I'm actually just going to delete this component, and I'm just going to put like a big H1 that says home. Oops. And okay, so if I save that, go back to the app, yep. And that way we can just kind of cleanly see the logout button here below. So we'll just say button, and then at the click of this button, we'll call the logout function that we haven't created yet. And I see right here it's complaining that we're not using the hello world component. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And really, we don't need to import it right here either. So now when the user clicks, it calls the logout method, but the problem is we don't have that method set up. So let's go down here and we're going to create logout. And Firebase actually makes this really easy. So all we need to do is just say Firebase and then do .auth and then .signout. And signout's gonna return a promise. So we can say .then. And now all we need to do is replace the router with login, and we've already kind of done that. So we just say this .router. Oops, let's see, syntax problems. And then .replace, and we're just going to replace login. And of course, Firebase needs to be imported. Oops, not here. All right, so really, if everything is set up correctly here, we should be able to just log out from Firebase now. So let's see, it might make it easier if with this button we just say like log out, and now we can go back to our app and let's see what happens. Cool. We are logged out and it throws us back to our sign in page. Now if I try to go to home, doesn't work. Redirects us to login because we're not authenticated. Okay, so awesome. So now really the last step right here is if the user signs in, we just want to send them to the home page, which right now that won't work. So let's go to login and .then this is the success. So instead of just having an alert, let's just redirect them to that page. So we'll just say this .router.replace, and then we'll just do home. And now we just want to do the same thing with the sign up component right here. So let's go to sign up. And instead of this alert, we'll just say this router, oops, .replace, and then home. Oh wait, I don't want to do, there we go. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see if it works. Save everything, head back over here. Let's test out the sign in. And something's not working, so 1 second, let's go back to our code here. And yeah, so router, we need the right syntax for that. So now we can go back. And it still doesn't work. What's going on here? Oh, I know what's going on. So the problem here is the function, we need to use ES6 arrow functions here because the way that this function set up, this has its own context. And so it's not working right here. So let's go ahead and just change this. to an arrow function. And same with down here. And now we need to do that on the sign up page as well. Cool. Okay, so let's try it again. Switch over here. So test. Log in. Oops, the password is invalid. Okay, so I must have mistyped the password. Awesome. Look at that. So cool. We even saw that our error is working correctly. Once the user logs in, they go to home. Let's hit log out, see what happens. Cool. Sends them to sign in. Let's try out sign up. So I'll just say test2 at test.com, and let's just add a password. I'm going to sign up. Nice. Okay, so we are authenticated. There's another user now stored here in Firebase, and we can see that if I refresh. Yep, there it is, test2. So we have 2 users. Great work, guys. This has been a really fun project. I hope this helps you kickstart off your own app that you're building. Sometimes authentication, it can be just the roadblocker and keep you from wanting to develop an app. And you know, post in the comments what you're working on, what you're building, what you think this authentication is going to allow you to build now. And I hope this helps you out. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, definitely subscribe. We're going to have more awesome tutorials like this coming your way. And we'll have Firebase and AWS tutorials. And the goal is just that we're all learning together. And I really look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks again. See you guys.